Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, Barry, and today's topic of discussion is going to be related to a recent announcement that I believe was actually made yesterday, or may possibly have been the day before, and that is regarding Scream 5. Now, obviously, it was a little while ago, just a few months ago, that Scream 5 was officially announced. Obviously, this film has been talked about on and off for years now. Scream 4 was released back in 2011, and everyone's been like, is there going to be a Scream 5? You know, when's it going to come out, etc. Obviously, with the passing of Wes Craven back in 2015, the franchise has very much been in limbo. And quite recently, it wasn't that long ago that Dimension Films had actually lost the licensing to Scream, and it was actually Spyglass that had actually acquired the rights. So the next Scream film is actually going to be the first film in the franchise to actually be a different studio. And obviously, with Wes Craven's passing, may he rest in peace, Kevin Williamson, that actually wrote 3 of the 4 Scream films, he did actually write screenplays for a 4th, 5th and 6th movie. Obviously, the screenplays for 5 and 6 haven't actually been used, and I don't believe they are going to get used. But it was recently announced, obviously, a few months ago that Scream 5's happening, and it's officially been given a release date. Obviously, this could be subject to change, you know, anything can happen, but at the moment, it's actually slated for a January 2022 release. So it's still quite a way away. I'm assuming the film's going to go into production probably late this year, possibly early next year. I'm excited. I'm excited for this film. I'm very apprehensive at the same time. This has actually been talked about on a previous podcast, that I actually find Scream to be at its best when it's actually Kevin Williamson on writing duties, but I'm certainly welcoming to a return. Scream 4 I actually thought was actually a slight improvement on the disappointing third film. Scream 3 was fun. It was certainly fun, but at the same time it almost felt like the franchise was actually becoming a parody of itself. At that point, Scream 3 at times kind of felt like it was the very movie that the first 2 films were wryly mocking. But with the 4th film, I did find it, again, it's a film that, you know, this is a franchise that doesn't really take itself too seriously. With the 4th film, it just had a lot of fun with it, but I did feel like it was actually an improvement. Now, Kevin Williamson didn't actually write the screenplay for the 3rd movie, and I think that's what the 3rd film, in my honest opinion, kind of sorely lacked. Now, a new director at the helm now. This is the directors behind Ready or Not, which was actually a good fun movie. I really enjoyed that film. I've not actually looked into as to who's actually writing the screenplay for this movie, but I do know that Kevin Williamson, I don't believe, is actually attached to this film. Now, obviously, we got David Arquette and Courtney Cox are back on board. Neve Campbell is in negotiations. I would certainly put my bank account on her returning. I just can't imagine a Scream film without Neve Campbell. I would certainly imagine that she's going to be back on board. As for any other characters at the moment, there are rumours, there's rumblings that Kirby from Scream 4 actually survived and she may very well return. I'd certainly say it's a possibility, but we'll see. I don't think we really know too much about this movie yet. But yeah, January 2022. Now, it's a weird one, really, because, you know, I'm not saying that a movie's release month is necessarily a make or break situation for a film. It isn't, but January tends to be a pretty bad month for horror films. I don't know why that is, but in January, we don't really tend to get many good horror films. You know, films like The Bye-Bye Man and recently this year, The Terrible Grudge, which was completely and utterly unnecessary. We already had a remake back in 2004. Yeah, January tends to be... I mean, The Boy, released in 2016, was actually a January release. That was an okay film. I thought The Boy was actually an okay movie. I felt like it was a film that was actually a lot better than it actually had any right to be. But for whatever reason, Januaries tend to be a pretty bad month for horror films. Now, you know, I'm hoping that Scream 5 actually breaks away from this kind of trend. You know, Scream 3 was released in February 2000, so, you know, not far off January, of course. But that's the release date anyway. Scream 1 and 2 were both released in December at the end of 96 and 97. Scream 4, I believe, had an April release of 2011. That's the thing, it will be 10 years, almost 10 years when this comes out since we had Scream 4. It's been quite a gap, but with Wes Craven's passing, you know, I do firmly believe that they've been very apprehensive about picking up this franchise. You know, we've had 4 installments already. Obviously, there was a TV series. I'll be honest, I wasn't overly keen. Admittedly, I haven't seen the 3rd season, which was essentially a reboot that actually brought back Roger L. Jackson, the voice of Ghostface in the 4 Scream films, and actually brought the movie-used Ghostface mask. But I wasn't really that keen on the Scream TV series. I thought it was okay at best. But who knows? I could talk about that series at a later date on a future podcast. But I'm excited. I'm excited for Scream 5, but apprehensive at the same time. But as long as we can get a solid slasher thing, I think it's really going to be difficult to kind of replicate, to be able to create the magic that the first film had especially. I think Scream 2 was actually a solid sequel that holds up pretty damn well to the first film. But I think one of the other reasons there's been a level of apprehension about this film really is because Scream 4, although it did well at the box office, it didn't make as much cash as what the studio would have hoped. Scream 4 actually was the only film in the franchise to make less than $100 million. Now, it wasn't an underperformance, it still did well, but it just didn't make as much cash as what they'd have hoped for. With Wes Craven's, that coupled with Wes Craven's passing, I think that there has been a degree of scepticism about a Scream 5, but I know the fans would love to see it, and of course, you know, I love the Ghostface costume, I'm not going to lie. You know, even if this film turns out to be not very good, I've still got the first 2 films to love and watch. So I'm not completely against another Scream film. I don't really feel like it's going to wholly diminish what the first 2 films did. Yeah, so January 2022 is when we're going to get Scream 5. So yeah, looking forward to it. As I said, little nervous. But based on Ready or Not, which was a good fun film, there's some optimism. I've got some optimism there. But yeah, anyway, that wraps up today's podcast. That's all I really wanted to talk about today, and I'll be back again soon to haunt you, torment you, and bombard your ears again. Take care.